All right, everybody. Welcome to our webinar Wednesday on our 2018 Night School series titled SOLIDWORKS Tips and Tricks. So if you couldn't join us for one of our local events where we had beer and food because maybe you're too far away from one of our offices or had to unfortunately do real work during the time and couldn't take off early, whatever the case, that's what this is for. So a little bit about myself. My name is Dayne McGuire-Lavallee, and I'm an applications engineer here at Hawkridge Systems, way up in our Edmonton, Alberta, Canada location. So I am our farthest north employee. So snow finally melted a couple months ago. But I have a background in mechanical engineering. I have a Bachelor's of Science from the University of Alberta. And I have about 17 SOLIDWORKS certifications. So I'm pretty good at SOLIDWORKS, but I don't pretend that I know everything. But that's the nice thing about Hawkridge Systems is if I can't answer your questions, there's 90 of us on our technical team that I can reach out to, and I'm sure someone will be able to answer a niche area that I might not be able to answer. So with that being said, I am very open to questions. There is a nice little question box down in your go-to interface. I will answer all the questions at the end for sure. If I notice the question mid-presentation and it seems that I can answer it pretty quickly and it'll be a smooth transition, I will most definitely answer it. If not, I will save it till the end. But don't fret if I don't answer it right away. I'll make sure to answer them all at the end. And worst case scenario, if we go over time, I can always respond via email if it's a more in-depth question. But this is the plan I have for these two webinars. So I'm going to break this up depending on the hour mark, probably somewhere halfway between that modeling section. So I've broken it into 5 sections where I am going to try and give you as many useful tricks as I can. The first one being the interface, next one being sketching, modeling, assemblies, and extras. So I have over 60 tips and or tricks to give you guys. So I'm going to be going through this really fast because I only have about 2 hours of screen time, and that gives me about 2 minutes per tip and trick. So I'm going to be going through it fairly quickly. But this is being recorded and will be posted on our website, so you can always go back and replay to get the nice click order, click procedure, or recapping on anything if it seemed cool to you, but went a little too fast. So inside the interface, the first things that I'm going to talk about are the 2018 welcome screen, auto-sizing our planes, primary planes, hiding all types, breadcrumbs, tree display, and our model display. So I'm just going to get a feel for my bandwidth and my lag time between my clicks so I can make sure everyone can see what I'm doing while I am talking. So if you are using SOLIDWORKS 2018, this is the welcome screen you're going to get introduced with every time you open your SOLIDWORKS. So it has everything you really need when you open SOLIDWORKS kind of condensed into one little place in the center of your screen to make it easy to access. At the top, you have all of your default templates, your default part, assembly, and drawing template, or you can hit the advanced button to find any custom templates you have made and have pointed your file references to. There's also the open button, so you can start browsing through your C drive or whatever, your network, and find the parts you want to open. You have your recent documents as well. So if there's something that you've been working on recently, it'll be right here at your fingertips and you can click on it to open it. You can also pin things to your recent documents. So I've pinned all of the models that I'm going to be presenting with today. Just in case I accidentally close something, I can easily access them at my fingertips. I also have recent folders as well down in the bottom left. And I clicked off my screen, it disappeared, but that's okay, I brought it back up. And you can also pin these folders. So I have all of these models that I'm working with organized into folders, and I have pinned them to my recent folders. So this is really nice if you're working on multiple projects kind of congruently and you need to switch between them, then you can pin them both up there and you're not browsing through your network locations every time you want to kind of change projects. These are categorized into tabs as well. So this is our home tab. You also have the recent tab, which is all of your recently opened files. So this is the same window as if you hit your R button. And there's another tab for recent folders as well. So this is just those other two views that we saw on the home screen, but just a lot bigger. And of course, you can pin things to make it easier to click on and grab folders or documents. There's a learning tab where you can get resources. So if there's an area of SOLIDWORKS you're interested in, you're not quite familiar with it yet, you can get samples or tutorials or links to your certification center to get some of those SOLIDWORKS certifications. And then finally, you have your technical alerts. So as we can see, SP3 for 2018 was available a week and a half ago. So you can get all of that access in one place. You don't have to go Google searching for it. Just click and it will link you to the download page. So I'm going to open up one of my recent documents for this sweep assembly. And another new thing is this nice little open metrics, which SOLIDWORKS has. So that kind of spun by really quickly. So I'm going to open up a nice JPEG or screenshot I took of it. And looking at this, it gives us a lot of information about our progress when we're opening our files. Usually the assemblies take a lot longer. So it's broken up into 3 bins. This first bin is literally opening the components. And that is SOLIDWORKS going, finding the part file, opening it up, loading all the parametric information, finding the references, so on and so forth, all in there. So that's really relative to your RAM. So as you can see, it says the last time I opened this file, it took me 22 minutes. So it was a really, really large assembly. And I used my large assembly techniques to get that down to the time that you saw. It took, I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds to open. Too fast for me to be able to explain any of this. So, and I used these metrics here to help me determine what I needed to do and which parts I needed to apply those large assembly techniques to. So for opening your components, you have a numerical indicator saying I'm opening component 41 of 755. And if this component is getting stuck here and it's taking a long time to open it, clearly that's a component that's gonna cause an issue for my opening time. And it will also list which file I'm opening. The next bin there is the updating of the assembly. So that's your rebuild time. So if you find when you're working on your model, you hit your rebuild button and you have to walk away and come back, fill up the coffee or something before it's ready to work again, that will be kind of indicated on this updating assembly. So maybe you have too many mates that are loaded, too many open-ended mates that have to recalculate every time. Maybe you have some infamous cyclical references where you have component A referencing component B, but component B is also going back and referencing component A, so they're just rebuilding each other over and over. So then you can use sub-assemblies or something like that to reduce your mates, get rid of some of those cyclical references. And then finally, you have your updating graphics. So if you find while you're rolling your screen around or moving around in your assembly environment that you're causing a lot of lag and it's taking too long, that will be shown in this updating of the graphics area. So a lot of info you can find out while you're opening your file. So here is my assembly. And I'm looking at my standard planes because I want to start mating some components relative to my assembly origin to line everything up, make sure they're centered, make sure I can mirror things. And they're really small. I can't really use them. They're extra tiny, so I'm going to zoom in here and show you how small they are. And that's just their default size. So I could sit here and try and drag this out and size it, but what I can do is I can right click on the plane and there's a nice auto size button. Clicking on that, it will resize my plane. So again, right click on the plane and click auto size, and that will resize my plane for me. And I'll do it for my right plane, and I'll click auto size, and it has resized all my planes. So right now I can't really see my planes, and I want to be able to see them all the time without having to click on them in my property manager on the left-hand side. That's kind of inconvenient. So what I have in my heads-up display is I have this hide all types. And I can come in here and I can force showing those primary planes. Then I can always see them and use them to line things up. I can also show things like my temporary axes. So any curved geometry will have a center point and a axis put through it. And I can show a whole bunch of other things as well. So this is also a button. So if I have selected multiple components in here and I don't want to have to turn them all off every time, because it's going to be 5 or 6 clicks, this is just a toggle switch. I can click on that eyeball and it will show everything that I want shown or hide everything that I have shown, which is really nice and really convenient. Something that was added in 2016 was breadcrumbs. And at first I was kind of skeptical about how useful they'd be, but the more I use them, the more I really like them. So I'm going to click on this face. And there is a whole bunch of possible selections that I could have had there via that click. So right now, SOLIDWORKS is going to the very bottom level. It's grabbing the face. And I get a shortcut menu based upon that face. But in my top left corner, I have my breadcrumbs. And my breadcrumbs is just a hierarchy of possible selections of the click that I just did. I can hit my D key and it will teleport the breadcrumbs right to where my cursor is. So I don't even have to move to the top left side of my screen. I can just tap D and boom, they come right for me. So I can click and grab the entire body. And I can right click and I can get a different right click menu based upon my body commands. I can grab the entire part and you can see I'm getting a different shortcut menu and a different right click menu as well. So all of those commands are at my fingertips. I'm going to grab this entire subassembly and I can see that I'm getting the planes of this subassembly. So I'm going to grab one of those planes and give it a mate to my right plane just to help line up this labeler. I need it to sit exactly where it is right now. So that was way easier to grab that assembly rather than browsing through my feature tree trying to figure out where it is. I can just click in the graphics area, use my breadcrumbs, and choose the selection that I actually want. So speaking of my tree over here, when you have lots of components that don't have any unique configurations or display states, your tree is going to say default everywhere, just default, 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 default. And that's, it's kind of annoying. It hurts my eyes. I can't really see what I want to see, and it's not very informative. If I had unique configurations and display states, it'd be really informative because of the nomenclature there. The first default is my configuration, and the second default is my display state. But all of these components and assemblies don't have unique configurations or display states. So I don't want to see all this default everywhere. So if I right-click at my top level, I can go to my tree display, and I have an option to not show configuration or display state names if only one exists. So I'll click on that and all of those defaults disappear. And now my feature tree is a lot more legible, cleaner, simpler, easier for me to understand. I also have multiple instances. So all these numbers in our triangle brackets are greater than, less than, indicate the instance number of that component. So I can see that I have 2 of those brackets, and I also have 2 groups of bottles. So what I can do with this tree display is I can go in and I can group component instances together. And that kind of gives me a folder structure. So I can click on the top level of the folder and it will select both of those instances, or I can open it up and grab each one of the instances independently from each other. So I can change the display style of my entire assembly up in my heads-up display. So this is kind of my global display style. So I can change everything to wireframe if I want to, but I'll leave it with the shaded edges. this little arrow right here in my feature tree will toggle on and off my display pane. And inside of my display pane, I can really start customizing the display mode of the different levels of components within my assembly. So I can grab maybe an entire sub-assembly right here, and I can make this wireframe, or I can come in and maybe grab a part. So I'll grab this part and I will make it hidden lines visible so I can see through it. So all of these changes I am making are changing my display state, and I can reference that display state inside of my drawing or maybe Composer, Visualize, or whatever kind of documentation software that I'm using. And of course, my SOLIDWORKS drawings, I can reference it in. So in my heads-up display, that's my kind of global display style. And then in my display pane, I can customize each one of my components as I see fit to really get across the message that I'm trying to get across. So that was our 2018 welcome screen: auto-sizing planes, primary planes, hiding all types, breadcrumbs, tree display, and our model display. The next interface things I'm going to talk about are the performance evaluation, mouse gestures, splitting our view, zonal section views, selection filters, selecting over geometry, and then two of my favorite options that I set up anytime I'm using SOLIDWORKS, and I find make me a lot more productive and make my life substantially easier. So the performance evaluation tool got a nice revamp, and it parallels really nicely to those open metrics that I showed you. So I have my open performance here, and it gives me a nice bar graph showing me which components took the longest to open, and then I can toggle through all of my components and see which ones are my biggest culprits. So my longest opening time is only 45 seconds. So it's not that big a deal, but if you have one that is significantly greater than the rest, then that's definitely going to be one of your first targets for your large assembly techniques. It also tells me how many previous versions components that I have. So 174 of my documents aren't 2018. So every time SOLIDWORKS opened it, it had to convert those files. So that's definitely going to be an impact on my opening time. I then have my display performance. So if I find that when I change my view, roll my model around, I'm getting a lot of lag and I have to kind of stand up and walk away from it because it takes literally that long. Well, this is going to tell me all of those culprits. So all of our models are broken up into graphics triangles, and I can see which one of my components has the most graphics triangles. So that's using the most resources of my graphics card. And right now I can see it's this 12mm elbow that I have. So that is a plumbing piece. It's a cylinder that's bending at an elbow, so it's got lots of curves to it. And of course, breaking up a circle into triangles, the smaller your circles, the better it looks. So I have 8 of them, and they're using significantly more triangles than everything else. So this is an internal part. So maybe if I'm just working on an external part, I don't really need to load that in. So maybe I'll have it hidden and unload my hidden components or something like that to make sure that it is not eating up my graphics resources every time. It also tells me the image quality of all of my parts. So what I can do to solve that is bump down the image quality. And the cool thing is that I can set all of the parts in an assembly to be the image quality of the assembly. So I don't have to go to every single part and change them all. I can do it at the top level and push it all down. Then of course I have all of my standard statistics that you're used to, how many parts you have, how many assemblies, the depth of those assemblies, and the usual performance metrics. So my favorite way for navigating my assembly and part environments is to use my mouse gestures. So for those of us that don't know what that is, if you hold down your right click button and move your mouse in a direction, you get a nice little menu of commands. So we can see that if I go to the top, that'll bring me to my top view, and it'll snap to my top view. I can swipe left, that'll snap to my left view. Swipe right, my right view, get my back view and my front view really quickly. So that's one way to navigate your components and look directly at your views other than just using your mouse wheel and rolling around. So those gestures are also fully customizable as well. So you can get maybe 4 gestures, 2 gestures, up to 12 gestures, whatever you're more comfortable with. And you can just search for your commands, and then you can drag those commands and drop them anywhere you'd like in your different environments. So again, your different modeling environments have different commands that you would access with your mouse gestures. So utilizing those is one of the best tips that I can share, because that'll make you so much faster, so much more productive. So another thing you can do is you can split your views and show multiple views at the same time. So that's really good if you're doing maybe some 3D sketches. Then you can see what angle you're going at and what it's going to look like from the front, top, and bottom, and even use those views to force your sketches upon those planes. So if you hit the space bar, it'll bring up your orientation menu, and I am going to change my screen to show 4 views at the same time. So I can see my front view, my top view, my left view, and that nice trimetric view in the bottom all at the same time. So by default, they're linked. So if I zoom in on one, it'll zoom in on all of them. But of course, I can unlink that and really customize the way that I want everything to look. So what I want to do now is I just want to graphically visualize the clearance of my door when I open it. So I'm going to grab my door in my trimetric view, and I'm going to open it, and I can see the effects in all of my other views. So I'm not running any clearance verification or interference detection. This is all just graphically for me, so I can get a feel for it, understand what it's going to look like, how much space there is, just visually, not actually mathematically. So very cool with those 4 views. So again, if you hit the space bar button, that'll pull up your orientation menu, and you can split your screen into 1, 2, or 4 separate viewports. Pretty handy, pretty cool. Sometimes you're trying to click on things and you're not actually getting the right click. So I just clicked in here, it turned blue, and I'm going to zoom in and I grabbed the edge, but maybe I actually wanted this face on the inside. So I can add selection filters. So if I hit my F5 button, we can see at the bottom of my screen, my selection filter menu just popped up. And I can filter just points, edges, faces, and we can see that there's some nice hotkeys for those as well. So getting to know those hotkeys can help you utilize these selection filters really, really easily. So I'm going to say, okay, select only edges. And then there we go. I grab that edge and I'm not accidentally grabbing the face. Makes my life a lot easier. Or I can go vice versa and grab only the face. So then when I'm a little bit further out, I know that I actually grabbed the face and not the edges because of my selection filter. So I can hit F6 and turn off, on and off. It's like a toggle switch, those selection filters. And then again, F5 will hide them. So by your cursor, there's a little drop-down menu for some different selection types you can do. So I'm going to select things by size. So as I do this, I'm going to grab the smallest 10% of my assembly. And this is 10% by volume. So if I zoom out here, we can see that the smallest 10% of my components have been selected. So that's pretty cool, pretty neat. I can grab all my small things, and maybe if I'm just doing a general overview or a general fit, I can just hide all those because the smaller things usually have a lot of graphics triangles, and that could be causing me some latency or lag while I'm rolling my screen around. I also have this button to invert my selection. So that's the white and black arrows kind of shadowing each other. So when I click this, what it's going to do is everything I have selected will become deselected, and everything I had deselected will become selected. It inverses my selection. And just like that, now I have everything except the smallest 10% selected. It's really cool, really handy if you want to grab a whole bunch of things except a couple components and they are not in a nice series line where you can just control select them. So that's really good. You click on the couple things you don't want selected and then invert your selection and you are good to go. So you can also access those menus up here with your select tool at the top of your screen as well. So I want to grab a couple of these components on my screen and I'm going to click on them, but I keep just grabbing faces. I'm not actually grabbing the full component with my control select. That's not what I want. I want to box select. But in order for me to box select, I have to be clicking in blank space in the graphics area. So speaking of box selects, you have two different styles of box select in SOLIDWORKS. You have your left to right box select, which will give you a blue box, and that will select everything fully enclosed within that blue box. You also have your right to left box select, which is going to grab anything that intersects the box. So you don't have to fully encompass it, you just have to touch it. But I can't box select here because there's a component in my way. So what I have is I have a tool called Select Over Geometry. And what that does is it will make my first click in blank graphics area so I can make myself a box. And this is a left to right box select, so it will grab everything fully encased inside. And now I have grabbed those two components really easily. So there's a hotkey for that as well. It is the T button. So if you tap T, that will toggle that on and off, making your first click blank graphic space. So that's also really nice if you want to kind of unselect things. So if I'm sitting in here and I don't want to select something, now I don't have to zoom out and click in blank graphic space or hit the escape button. I can just click through any of my components. So I'm going to go into my options now and show you my two favorite options that I always customize. And those are in my system options under the sketch section. And the first one is auto rotate my view normal to sketch plane on sketch creation and sketch edit. So what that means is anytime I open or edit a sketch, I will always be looking straight down on that sketch. My next favorite option is enabling on-screen numeric input on entity creation. So while I'm creating an entity, my smart dimension tool is going to pull up right alongside me, and I can add the dimension to that entity as I create it. So that saves me from having to sketch and then use my mouse gesture to grab my smart dimension tool and then dimension. I can do it all in one fell swoop. So that's my auto rotate view and my enable on-screen numeric input. And when I do the sketch section next, you will see those tools in their full glory. So that is all for our interface section. And I went over the welcome screen, auto size those planes, kind of hit all types, breadcrumbs, tree display, performance evaluation, mouse gestures, split view, selection filters, selecting over geometry, and then my two favorite useful options there. We're now going to get into some sketching. And I'm going to talk about reversing sketch offsets, the segment tool, detaching sketch segments, and instant 2D. So right now, we're going to watch that option do its thing. So I am looking definitely not normal to the face that I have highlighted in blue. So when I click Edit Sketch, SOLIDWORKS is going to automatically swipe my screen around for me, so I'm looking directly down upon that sketch. Really handy, really convenient. I love it. So I have this nice offset here, and unfortunately I highlighted it in blue and the background of the part is blue, so you can't see it that well, but I offset this kind of bone shape, and I set it the wrong way. So what I can do is I can right click on the dimension and I can reverse the direction, really handy. Or in my modify box, there is an option, which is those two arrows, the dark arrow and the gray arrow, and I can tap that and it will toggle my direction for me. I can even type in a negative number in the dimension box and it will reverse the offset for me. So that's really cool, really handy. I don't have to delete it and restart because I went in the wrong way. I want to add some holes now for this face of my component so I can connect something to it. And I'm going to use my hole wizard tool because it's going to give me an awesome call out in my drawing, make my life really easy. So again, I'm going to click on this face. It's going to open up a sketch. And because of that option, it's going to auto rotate my screen for me. Nice and smooth, nice and sharp. Awesome, just like that. Use my mouse gestures to grab my circle. And as I make this circle, you can see the other option come into play. There's a nice input box for my dimension. So I already clicked on the origin there to locate the center of my circle. Now I can type in my dimension and we can see that SOLIDWORKS has smart dimensioned my entity for me based upon the drafting standard in my document template. Really handy, really awesome. So I'm using the hole wizard tool. I need some sketch points to locate where those holes are going to go. So instead of me grabbing my point tool and tapping them down on this circle and then dimensioning them, I'm going to use the segment tool. And what the segment tool will do is it will grab this arc or line entity and break them into segments. So it can either give me arc segments or put points segmented along that entity. So I'm going to put 4 of them in there, and that looks pretty good. I can also move them around, and we can see that they are maintaining the equal spacing, which is really handy. It's also editable. So I can come in here and I'm like, oh no, wait, I actually need 5. I can edit those segment points, bump it up, and now I have 5 of them that are evenly spaced. I'll add a nice relation to my center point, make it vertical. Now I'm fully defined. And I have these nice little holes via my hole wizard tool using that segment tool. Nice and quick, nice and easy. So these holes that I have just highlighted upon the side, I need to change their pattern. So whatever they're connecting to, it changed. So I want to edit the sketch. But if I go in here and I start deleting lines, that might cause problems later on down in my feature tree. So this was a pretty early on feature, and I don't want to cause explosions later on down the line because every entity has an edge and face ID, and I don't want to lose that information. So I don't want to just delete stuff, but I can't quite get this circle to go exactly where I need it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my detach segment on drag. So if I right click on an entity, I have the option to detach the segment on drag. So I'm going to click on that, and I can see I have these 2 purple endpoints on that segment. So if I click and drag the segment, it will detach at those purple endpoints. It still maintains its horizontal relation, and it still has its face and edge ID associated with it. I can also grab 1 point and pull it down and maybe snap it to the midpoint. And then I'll drag my circle over, and that's the new design I want. And look at that, nothing exploded, everything lined up just the way I want it to. It's looking good, really cool. Instant 2D is accessible once you have defined a feature for a sketch. And what it does is it'll give me a preview in my sketch mode of what the three-dimensional component is going to look like. So I can roll around and see how this sketch affects everything. So I'm going to use my Instant 2D, and I'm going to pull my geometry a little bit bigger, and I can see exactly what that looks like in 3 dimensions. So again, I'll grab maybe this inside, make it a little bigger, and I can see exactly what that looks like before I even finish rebuilding the part and going back into 3D, all with the nice Instant 2D. So back to the PowerPoint. That is reversing our sketch offsets, the segment tool, detaching a segment on drag, and Instant 2D. To finish off the sketching, I'm going to talk about our shaded contours, converting internal entities, the S shortcut menu, virtual sharp points, 3D mirroring, sketch pictures, and sketch blocks. So I just got a question, can you share the webinar after? And yes, of course, this is going to be recorded and it will be posted on our website as soon as that is ready to go. But I will take note of your name and make sure that you get that a nice little reminder email when that's done. Good question. So when you are sketching closed contours and you have your shaded contour sketch on, something happens inside of SOLIDWORKS. It will color in your enclosed areas. So that's really nice because what it allows me to do is it kind of behaves like a sketch block. If I click in that enclosed area, I can move it around, but I can also grab a point and reline everything up that way as well. So if I have multiple enclosed areas within my contour, SOLIDWORKS will shade it differently. So you can see all of your contours kind of labeled differently. So you can see when I hover over the internal area, highlighted in orange is what my selection is going to be, and that will allow me to grab the entire outside geometry. So that saves me from having to right-click select chain or right-click select loop. I can just click in the inside area and grab the entire selection. So I'll make myself a nice little offset. That looks good. So now I have kind of 3 levels of these nested contours. And if I hold down my Alt button while in the sketch environment, I can pre-select certain contours and then use those contours to maybe make a nice little cut. So that's really cool with those shaded contours. This part has a whole bunch of holes in it. And usually these holes need to line up with something else because there's going to be a pin in there connecting them or something like that. So the Convert Entities tool is really nice for me to be able to project these holes onto another sketch. So if I'm making a multi-body part, then I can do that. But sometimes the holes are multiple entities. So this square hole here has 4 edges and 4 arcs. So that's 8 clicks for me to grab all of those components. So inside of the Convert Entities property manager, you have the option to select inner loops. So if I check that off, that will reduce me down to 1 click for that entire area, which is nice, but there's another way to go about it. I can right click on it and I can select tangency and then use my mouse gestures to grab my convert entities. That's one way to do it. Or I can grab the face and one of the edge entities and do my convert entities, and that will grab the entire area for me, sorry, the entire loop for me as well. So I don't know if you noticed in this section, but I have been using my S shortcut menu. So what that is if I tap my S button, you can see this menu appears for me. And there's a different menu for your sketch environment, part environment, assembly environment. All of those have different menus and they're fully customizable. You can change the shape of them, the order of features you want in there, and of course the features that you have in there. So the first one that I use the most is my center line or my construction line, and I put that in there, and that saves me from having to roll all the way up to the top of my screen, hit my drop down arrow to grab my center line. I can just tap S and it's right there at my fingertips. I have also put in a couple features as well. So I put my extrusion and my extruded cut in that menu, and that saves me from having to go up to my command manager, mouse wheel to the features and click on the feature that I want. It's all right here at my fingertips, making me really speedy and really productive. So I'm just going to cut a thin feature to make a nice little groove. And there we go. I have slotted myself out a groove. So the final thing I want to do to this part is I want to add one more hole because it's not quite holy enough. And this hole needs to be exactly where this line at the bottom connects and this line right here connects. So I need to find where they intersect. So I could grab a construction line, make it collinear and drag them until they actually connect. But if I have these two lines pre-selected, I can come over to my point tool, click it, and right there, SOLIDWORKS will add a point for me where they intersect. And then I can come in here, make my sketch, and then cut the hole all the way through. So I just got like 4 of the same question. How do you customize the S sketch menu? If you right click in a blank area of your command manager at the top, there is a nice customize button. When you click on the customize button, there is this tab called shortcut bars. And then from there, you can grab your part environment, assembly environment, drawing environment, and then your sketch environment. So then from here, I can grab all of my features or commands from the left side, and I just literally drag them into my shortcut menu on the right side. So again, right click in your blank space of the command manager, hit customize, go to your shortcut bars tab, and then you have the 4 different environments where you can customize them. And then you can just drag the shape around as well. But I like my shape, so I don't want to mess it up. Great question. Thanks for that. Really good. All right. The next thing we're going to talk about is some enhancements to 3D sketches that happened in 2018. So this is a 3D sketch, and I have an error. My circle resolution is not set very good at all. I have it pretty low so I can maneuver really quickly because mathematically it's still a circle, but I don't need to see it as a perfect circle. The exact number, I don't know, but it's real close to the low side. So I had this sketch and I made some changes to it and my tangency got flipped on me. So instead of me having to delete this component or this entity here and re-sketch it, what I can do is I can right click on the entity with the tangent relation and I have the option to reverse that endpoint tangency. And now that's not going to cause other features dependent on that arc to blow up down the road unless I use my replace feature. But that's a nice, easy technique for that. When you're doing a 3D sketch, you can also mirror about planes now in 2018. So that's really nice because it will force my symmetry. So of course, whatever I do to one side is going to automatically happen to the other side with that mirror. So now that I fixed that tangency, my sweep feature worked and everything is happy and good to go. So something that happens to me a lot is when I used to have a cutting machine, is people would come up to me with a picture and they'd hold it up and be like, I want this, but engraved in wood or cut out of sheet metal or something. And I'm looking at it and I was like, oh, there's so many contours in there. I don't want to have to write that G code manually or have to remodel that. And there's an awesome little tip and trick in SOLIDWORKS, which makes that a lot easier. You can actually import a picture into your SOLIDWORKS environment via a sketch, and then you can have SOLIDWORKS trace it, or you can trace it yourself. So that's what I did here. I have this little crown skull guy, and this is literally a JPEG. All of that black imagery there, that is a JPEG, and I am going to hide it. And I, of course, traced it myself using my spline tool, made it a piece of sheet metal, and now I can just export this as a DXF or DWG, and then my machine can read that and make me a nice, easy cut. So I'll kind of show you guys how I did that. So, of course, to insert a sketch picture, you need to be inside of a sketch. So I'm in a sketch, and if I go to my tools, all the way down to my sketch tools, I have the option to insert a sketch picture. You can also search your commands for it. That will make life significantly easier. And I'm going to insert this nice little cat picture because I had a client. She wants this cat cut out of sheet metal so she can put it on her fence post. And it reminds her of her cat that used to sit there all the time. So I have some scaling tools. So I'm going to say, okay, I need this cat to be about a foot tall. And I can set the full image to a foot tall. But looking at my image, I have some dead space. So really my cat's not a foot. So I want to grab my scale tool and go from tail to ear. I want that to be a full foot. So now the distance of this nice scale tool, or my blue line, that is 1 foot. And now I'm going to start tracing it. So if I hit my next button in my property manager, that will pull up my trace tool. And I can come in here, and for these high contrast images like this, so it's literally black on white, it's really easy for SOLIDWORKS to trace. So I hit my begin trace, and there we go. It put a nice little spline all the way in there for me. So I can play with my image brightness, contrast, tolerance, things like that, and get myself a pretty good trace. So it looks really good, except right at the tail here, some of the spline handles got a little bit carried away. So I'm just going to simplify the spline. So if you right click on a spline, you can simplify it. It'll reduce some of those spline handles. And now that looks really good. And from here, I can maybe go into my sheet metal and make this a base flange tab. So I like this cat. This is pretty cool. And maybe I want to use this as a logo. So if it is a logo, I'm going to need it to be different sizes. So I have big products, I have little products. So I need a small cat for my smaller products and a bigger cat for my bigger products. And I don't want to have to sketch this every time and re-import that image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use what's called sketch blocks. So I'm going to grab all of those entities. I'm going to make myself a sketch block. And what a sketch block is it is a collection of entities that get grouped as one solid piece. So the relative distance between all those entities is not going to be able to change. And I can resize this. I can make it bigger with the scale tool, or I can make it smaller, and all the relative geometry between all those entities is staying the same. I can also rotate it as well, put it at different angles, and I can even add relations to other sketch entities or model geometry of whatever I'm putting this sketch on. So these sketch blocks are really good for commonly used sketches. So maybe some bolt patterns, logo embossing, schematic symbols, things like that. So you can save these sketches as an external file and import them into to other models to use them. So sketch blocks have another unique feature, and that's inside of the assembly environment. So when I'm working with sketch blocks in the assembly environment, I can use them to test two-dimensional kinematic motion and get a nice little proof of concept. So in the layout mode of my assembly environment, I have put a whole bunch of sketch blocks. So these sketch blocks are stuck on this plane. They're two-dimensional, they can't come off the plane, but they have all of their translational and rotational degrees of freedom upon this plane. So I can move them up and down on this plane, and I can rotate them on the plane as well. So I'm going to take this component and I'm going to make it coincident with my origin, and that will get rid of my translational degrees of freedom, but I can still rotate this. It can still spin. So this is going to be my fixed bar of this 4-bar member. So I'm going to take this construction line, lock that at horizontal, and now it is fixed right there. So I'm going to add some other relations and just connect these with some coincident relations, or a pin connector here, and lock those in. There we go. And last but not least, the bottom one. And now that I have sufficiently restricted some of the degrees of freedom, I can come in here and test my two-dimensional motion. So with this geometry, I can see how far that rocker bobs. So this is really good for proof of concept, and it's really easy to make changes as well. So I can just edit the block, change one of the dimensions, and then come in here and test how that change affects my potential motion. So again, this is all just two-dimensional motion. You can't do sketch blocks with three-dimensional motion, and the real benefit of this is that it's quick. I don't have to actually model parts. I don't have to go into the assembly and set all these mates. I can just do it all in 2 dimensions with sketches and sketch entities, saving me a bunch of time. What I can do from here is I can make parts from these blocks as well. So that's what I did in this model right here, is I have all of these components, and by all I mean 4 of them, and they are all based upon the sketch block. So if I look from the side, I can see my kind of layout plane is right in the middle, and then I've offset all of these parts. So I can move them around again and see my motion in all its glory. So this is also really convenient because all of these parts are dependent on geometry and location based on these sketch blocks. So if I make a change to the sketch block, change its length, then we can see that the location and geometry of all of those components change to follow suit to all those changes. So any change I want to make is all going to be located in one location. So that's cool. That's really good. Let's go to the PowerPoint, and this is all we are going to do for today, which is good. That's some good timing. So just to recap, we touched on some tips and tricks for the interface, as well as some tips and tricks for sketching. So that was listed all here on the screen. So with that, I thank you guys for attending. So those of us that were kind of trickled in late, these are being recorded. So if you missed the beginning, that's okay. It will, it's being recorded and it will be posted on our website for you to review. So no worries there if you missed the beginning. It was all recorded. It was super awesome. Sorry you missed it, but you'll be able to rewatch it anytime you please off our website. So now I'm going to kind of go through some of the questions that I ignored. So if you don't care about that, please feel free to excuse yourself. If not, I will come in and start answering these questions. When editing a sketch, is there an easy way to hide everything else like part bodies or all of the assembly? Yes, there is. So let me go back to my SolidWorks here. This doesn't have any model geometry. So if I am inside of a sketch and I don't want to see all of this geometry, what I can do is I can literally hover my mouse over top of it and hit the tab button, and that hides all of the model geometry. So you can do that in the part or assembly environment. So tab is your default hide, shift tab will bring that back in. Or you can go into your display pane and I can grab individual features or bodies or components to hide and show. So maybe I want to show this sketch, maybe I want to hide that sketch, maybe I want to hide that sketch, maybe I want to show that sketch. Things like that. So the quick and easy way to hide everything is tab, and shift tab will pull it back, or you can go into your display pane and hide and unhide from there. Can you rename the sketch blocks in your assembly? If so, then how do you do this without affecting the original sketch block? So there's a couple ways to go about that. That's a really good question. So if you have a sketch block that you imported, while you're importing it, you have the option to link it to the original sketch block or break the link to the original sketch block. So if you break the link to the original sketch block, then you can make any changes to it without affecting the original sketch block file, which has links to everywhere else that you used it in. So there's that nice little click radio button, I guess, checkbox to link or unlink that sketch block. So I have a question here. Can a single part be added to multiple part groups? I'm not sure I fully understand that question. So is that in the assembly environment? You're trying to kind of group your components together? Or is that kind of a multi-body part and you're trying to group it together? So if you want to kind of rewrite that question for me, then maybe I can better understand that. Because you can insert parts into parts to get a multi-body part. So you can have part A open, and then you can insert part B into it, all in the part environment. And you can even locate it with assembly mates to then make a multi-body part, which you could then grab those two bodies and combine into a single part. But I'm not sure if that was the intent of your question or not. But I'll give you a couple minutes if you want to rewrite that question so I can better understand it and get you the answer you desire. But if not, guys, thank you for attending. I will be doing this again the same time next week for the exciting part 2, where we will do some modeling and assembly, and then a little bit of simulation, and then some cool Hawkware tools, things like that. And again, I'll see you guys next week.